It's Thursday, the 31st of August, 2023. Welcome to the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Jennifer Duke.
Good morning, Michael.
Now, Jen, 5 stories in 5 minutes. Let's get straight into it because story number 1 is a big one. A date has finally been set for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice referendum. October 14 is when 17.5 million Australians will head to voting booths to vote yes or vote no.
It's going to become a landmark date that will be forever in Australia's history books, and that's kind of regardless of which way this vote goes. For the voice to be successful, they need a majority of yes votes, both in overall numbers as well as a majority of states, but not territories. And so it was no accident that Prime Minister Anthony Albanese chose Adelaide, which is almost a swing state on this, to make the announcement. Now, Albanese says constitutional recognition is supported by more than 80% of Indigenous Australians, and he thinks it will lead to practical change and positive outcomes. He used his speech announcing the date to call on people to rise to the moment and recognise the First Peoples of Australia.
Okay, 6 weeks. What can we expect?
So this is the first referendum in about 25 years, and it is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for Australians to vote. It's compulsory and you can pre- and postal vote. It's going to be a massive period of time for campaigning for both the yes and the no camps. Worth remembering that only 8 out of 44 referendums have successfully passed since Federation. There'll be a big ramp up in corporate campaigning as well. Earlier this week, more than 450 company directors signed up to back the voice, and the majority of ASX 20 companies are also publicly supporting. I suspect we're going to see an awful lot more businesses making noise.
I suspect you might be right. On to story number 2. There are strong signs that inflation is slowing for good. Now, your day job is economics correspondent for Capital Brief, so you'll be keeping a very close eye on this. The latest data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics found the Consumer Price Index increased 4.9% in the 12 months to July.
Yeah, this is a must-watch statistic for everyone keeping an eye on the economy right now, in particular because we've got an RBA board meeting next week where they're going to decide on interest rates. And inflation is obviously a massive part of that. The peak of annual inflation was 8.4% in December.
So I'm guessing then that this would be potentially good news for mortgage holders?
Well, inflation obviously remains above the Reserve Bank's target of 2 to 3%, but it's heading down much more quickly than most economists were expecting. And this will be a real source of comfort to the board. Most of the economist notes published yesterday said this is an extra reason to keep rates on hold. So I'd say it is pretty good news for mortgage holders.
And anything else interesting that you found while rummaging through the data?
Housing was the biggest contributor in July, up 7.3%, while food and non-alcoholic drinks were also up significantly. But this was offset by petrol down 7.6% and fruit and veg was down 5.4%, thankfully. Electricity prices were up significantly, though, in the 12 months to July.
Okay, story number 3, Meta has shut down almost 8,000 Facebook accounts targeting users in Australia and other countries with political spam and misinformation. Now, Jen, the best part of this is that this was part of a Chinese spamouflage campaign.
It's a terrific name, and the Australian Strategic Policy Institute actually coined it. Now, ASPI was involved in the investigation, which began in 2019, and there were many other research groups involved too, and it found that more than 500,000 people were following one or more of these malicious accounts. This network of spammers originated in China and targeted many regions. It posted positive commentary about China, criticisms of the US, and lashed out at critics of the Chinese government, including journalists and academics. The operation also tried to claim that COVID originated from the US. And a quick look through the report, which lists all the headlines from the fake articles and the posts, and there was one that actually said, the real version of the Matrix, the United States is monitoring the world. It's pretty interesting misinformation in there.
Yeah, sure is. All right, story number 4. Future Fund Chairman Peter Costello has warned that investors appear to be pricing in a Goldilocks scenario despite major challenges for markets.
So share markets have been surprisingly strong over the last 6 months, but Costello is warning that the downside risks are growing. He's particularly concerned about inflation staying higher than markets expect due to wages and price pressures, and therefore interest rates staying higher for longer. He said there's also the risk for developed economies facing recessions as the full impact of higher rates hasn't yet been felt. The Future Fund posted a 6% return for the year to June. That's below its 10% target, but it is still above on its 3, 5 and 10-year targets, and it has a 7.7% average annual return since it was created in 2006. So not too shabby.
No, not too shabby at all. All right, last one. Story number 5. Jen, have you ever ordered takeaway, and it just doesn't look quite as good as it did in the advertising. This is actually a real problem that Burger King is facing in the US at the moment. There's a lawsuit there specifically over the size of its Whoppers in reality compared to the way they look in the ads.
So angry customers have a bit of a beef with the $30 billion burger chain, and they've started a class action. They're saying the in-store menu boards made the burger look 35% specifically bigger than they actually are, and they appear to have double the meat in the ads than in real life. Part of the claim is that the pictures look like the ingredients overflow the bun when they don't, and Burger King doesn't reckon, though, that its burgers need to look exactly like the picture. It actually tried to get the case thrown out, but a US judge has upheld it. Even more interesting, McDonald's and Wendy's are facing similar cases in New York. These lawsuits are seeking millions of dollars in damages, though, so it's no small fry.
Oh, one story, two great puns. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks so much, Michael.
It is Thursday, the 31st of August, 2023. Remember to hit follow on the podcast. If 5 minutes isn't enough, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed Business News wherever you listen to podcasts. And check today's show notes as well. I'll put a link in there to the latest episode of How Do They Afford That, which is all about how to use frequent flyer points to get business class upgrades and free flights and a whole bunch of things. It is well worth a listen. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.